So, it happened at last. After nearly 15 years, it's now possible to play GoldenEye 007 on Xbox 360, something that previously only a few unnamed people have been able to do. The existence of the unreleased Xbox Live Arcade version of GoldenEye has been known for a pretty long time, but details on it have always been a little bit murky. Slowly but surely, more and more info has come to light. The sort of thing that people kind of forget about for years until something surfaces and people think, gee, sure would be nice to actually play this thing, before it goes away again. But now, as of February 2021, it is very much available, and the general consensus is that it was worth the wait. Now that we do have a bit of closure on this long hoped for release, well, just what happened with it all? Why didn't we get to experience it back in the day, and how did it eventually come to light? It's all worth examining if for no other reason than a trip into the still very murky world of developer shenanigans, software leaks and disputes in the era of the Xbox 360. And it's certainly worth looking at GoldenEye in this incarnation, especially for someone like me who would have been quite happy to play it like this, someone who was a PlayStation kid and didn't get to experience the glories of the game on N64 like so many other folks did. So let's try and get to the bottom of it all and compile the entire whirlwind of info on the game that's come out over the past couple of weeks into a big chunk of content. I expect that GoldenEye 007 doesn't need much introduction, beyond simply saying that it's a game that changed console FPSs forever, one of the N64's most successful titles, and almost certainly the best regarded licensed game or tie-in game of all time. That's straightforward enough. It's undoubtedly Rare's greatest success. The UK games company from the quiet village of Twycross will always be inextricably linked with GoldenEye, and it's surely something of a pain for them that they've never fully been able to celebrate that. Perhaps it would have been easier if they'd continued to stick with Nintendo, as they had done for most of their life. But that all changed in 2002, when Microsoft bought them for $375 million, and they became exclusive to the Xbox console line. Still, with the 10th anniversary of the release of GoldenEye approaching in 2007, Rare were pretty determined to commemorate their classic, with the plan being to release a 10th anniversary edition of GoldenEye 007 on Xbox Live Arcade. A small team of 8 Rare employees worked on this title for around a year, and they had a pretty simple plan in place. Rare had no desire to make drastic changes to the game or anything like that. They simply wished to put it out once more, just with lovely upscaled high definition textures running at 60 frames per second, the odd little quality of life improvement, and any other little changes that would be needed to keep all the involved parties happy. Everything else was going to be the GoldenEye everyone knew and loved, including the game's much celebrated multiplayer, which of course would now be on Xbox Live. The big challenge rather than actually developing this game was, of course, the aforementioned art of keeping the involved parties happy, which was no small feat. You've got Activision, who held the exclusive license to make 007 games at the time. You've obviously got Nintendo, the folks who originally published GoldenEye and N64. And then you have the IP holders themselves, not just MGM, but Eon Productions and Danjaq, respectively the production company behind the films and the custodians to the rights of everything related to James Bond on screen, essentially the family of Albert R. Broccoli. That's a lot of people to keep happy. All of them are infamously protective and not easy to work with, and Rare knew that if anything was going to scupper the project, it was going to be literally any one of these guys. For a long time, Rare thought they had everyone on side. Activision, for their part, never had any real issue with the project at all, they happily granted permission. For a long time it appeared as though Nintendo didn't have any issue with it either, although that's changed recently. Meaning that generally the blame for the game's eventual cancellation was assumed to lie with MGM and the Broccolis. It was believed that a dispute occurred between Microsoft and MGM because MGM wished to censor the title and bring it in line with updated licensing guidelines for what could be shown on screen. That's generally what was reported in the gaming press at the time, and seeing as Microsoft never officially admitted the existence of this HD port, details were murky enough as it is, and this reasoning didn't really go questioned. Yet it doesn't seem to sit too well. GoldenEye is not exactly an ultra-violent game as is, certainly no more than your average Bond flick, and short of MGM demanding changes to the game that would have been completely unreasonable, it doesn't seem like a dispute that would have stopped the game in its tracks, if it even happened at all. The other thing that was also been kind of reported, basically the other rumour that's been thrown about for a long time, is that at the very last minute Nintendo decided to rescind their support for the game's release due to the actions of a top-level Nintendo of Japan executive, who decreed that GoldenEye was a Nintendo game and that it would never appear on a competitor's machine. Now the thing about all of this is that, especially with all of the different parties involved, if this dispute had ever escalated to legal proceedings, it would have been a total mess. It's not clear if Nintendo would have actually had a leg to stand on in this argument from a legal point of view, and they knew it. But they had other ways and means. They could turn their muscle against Activision, who did have the theoretical leg to stand on as the then rights holders for 007 based games, and lean on them in order to get the game cancelled. Recent developments indicate that this is what happened. Nintendo leaned on Activision, and Activision, not wishing to upset the Big N, withdrew their permission for Rare to port GoldenEye to the 360. There certainly could be a bit of truth to the MGM story, of course, but that also would have likely been at Nintendo's instigation. Rare tried to placate the Big N by offering to launch the remake on the Wii Virtual Console as well, but alas, no dice. This now appears to be the true story of why GoldenEye 007 XBLA got cancelled. Indeed, it appears as though the identity of said Nintendo executive is known too. And of course, it was the man at the very top himself. The late Satoru Iwata, president and CEO of Nintendo, bluntly said that GoldenEye was a Nintendo product and should only be on a Nintendo platform. And as much as you might think that statement to be utterly bullshit, that was pretty much that. Rare's work on GoldenEye 007 wasn't fully in vain. Much the same team of people worked on the HD re-release of Perfect Dark, which came out in 2010 to celebrate that game's 10th anniversary and follows much of the same principles, with gameplay that's just about unchanged from the original and a bunch of highly welcome technical improvements. Essentially all the ones that had been promised from the now canned Xbox Live Arcade version of GoldenEye. Also in 2010, Activision released their multi-platform remake of GoldenEye 007. A retelling of the plot with updates to fit the grittier Daniel Craig Bond, it's a fair bit different to the original. In fact, for most people it was far too different, and the game didn't really end up standing out at all. It certainly doesn't satisfy those who are after a way to play GoldenEye on modern consoles. Most people would have been far happier with what Rare had planned. This wasn't the end of it all either. Rare did make another well-documented attempt to re-release GoldenEye in 2015 as part of their 30th anniversary Rare Replay compilation for the Xbox One. Alas, efforts to untie the Gordian knot of companies and rights once again fell through. When the game list for Rare Replay was released, and Rare inevitably had to field questions about the lack of GoldenEye, the company line was that they'd wished to concentrate purely on original games they'd made, as opposed to second-party titles based on another company's product. This reasoning didn't just cover GoldenEye, but also the Donkey Kong games. And of course it was rubbish. Rare would have obviously had these games on Rare Replay in a heartbeat, if only they'd been able to. In the vain hope that the stars would align, Rare filmed a whole bunch of documentary footage and interviews with the GoldenEye dev team in 2014 for inclusion on Rare Replay, if they'd been able to get the game on there. Said footage made its way onto the internet in 2019 as part of a video leak. But it simply wasn't to be. As the Xbox boss man himself, Phil Spencer, has often tweeted, re-releasing GoldenEye has always been an issue of sorting out the rights, as opposed to sorting out the code. And in the end, they've always felt like they had no option except to give up. So much for all of the official attempts to get GoldenEye out there then. Sometimes you just have to throw your hands up and recognise you're not going to be able to do it. But how do we get to where we are now? A leaked version of the game that's around 90% complete that can either be played on a hacked Xbox 360 console or on the Xenia emulator. Well, that's where things get even more obscure and shady. The layers have slowly come off this story over the course of many years. Despite it never really being confirmed officially, everything from concrete details to wild rumours about the existence of Xbox Live GoldenEye have been spreading almost since the time it was cancelled. First off, well, how did this get out there? The answer most likely lies in PartnerNet, the version of Xbox Live that developers on the system uploaded beta content to and was only accessible via a dev kit. PartnerNet is kind of a ridiculous thing. Microsoft's policies meant that developers kind of had to use it, and there wasn't an awful lot of protection on the client side. Indeed, Microsoft seemed to think that a universal NDA and a perceived threat of Microsoft being able to brick dev kits remotely if they suspected them of shenanigans would be enough to prevent material from being leaked from PartnerNet, which of course it wasn't. Especially not when dev kits weren't just in the hands of bona fide 360 developers. Now, if you want more details on PartnerNet, as well as the great lengths people would go to in order to get their hands on 360 dev kits, you really ought to go to the fantastic YouTuber and friend of the channel Modern Vintage Gamer. He has a lot of content about all the history of PartnerNet and about the late 2000s hacking scene in general, and he's just generally a really friggin' good channel. The story of GoldenEye XBLA's initial leaking sounds like a legend in and of itself, to the point where a lot of people didn't believe it for quite some time. It was said that a folder called Project Bean, Rare's codename for GoldenEye, was uploaded to PartnerNet for all of an hour by the archetypal disgruntled employee who's responsible for an awful lot of shit over the years, presumably unhappy with the fate of the game. It was up, and then it wasn't. But what with all the people who were using the service at any given time, ranging from legit developers to clandestine dev kit owners scraping it for early or unreleased content, it was up long enough for people to grab the 700MB download for themselves. In an alternate world, such a prized bit of software could well have been leaked immediately, depending on who got it. But instead it would continue to be shrouded in mystery, with its existence only confirmed by several YouTube videos. The first of these actually dates all the way back to January 2008, a 3-minute video showing off the silo level. There wasn't an awful lot to go on here, and some people back then may have wondered if this video was faked. Certainly Microsoft weren't forthcoming in the slightest when the press questioned them about it. But nowadays it certainly appears to be the real deal when compared with other videos and what we have now. This little video didn't actually receive a huge amount of attention, and things went almost totally dark for 8 years, until August 2016, when a YouTube channel called Rare Thief uploaded a 30-minute video featuring gameplay from the XBLA version. This content right here was dynamite, and it certainly got a lot more traction in the press. First off, it's in widescreen and HD, unlike the first video, meaning we actually get a much better idea of what the game would have looked and played like, complete with the lovely new scanned faces and a high quality version of the game's classic original soundtrack. It also shows off some other features the game would have had, such as the ability to switch from the new version of the game to a version that simulates the fuzzier, lower texture graphics of the original with just the push of RB, similar to what can be found in other HD remakes. The video also shows off a bit of multiplayer, and we get to see other quality of life improvements. The XBLA version has an option to make every character the same height, meaning that there's no longer any advantage or disadvantage to picking Jaws or Oddjob. There's other little things too. You can change the aspect ratio if you want to play in more traditional 4:3. The cheats have returned with minor changes such as changing DK mode to Big Head mode, and also 3 entirely new multiplayer levels to fiddle around with. Obviously no one official was forthcoming about the game even after this leak, but it certainly squashed any lingering doubts about the existence of GoldenEye on XBLA. From this point on, the actual leaking of the software was just a matter of time. In fact, there's enough differences between the versions seen in these videos and what we have right now for most people to believe that there's more than one build of XBLA GoldenEye out there. And yet it still took until now for it to finally get out to a wider audience. How come? Well, there's various reasons why this became rarer than hen's teeth. Sure, some of the people who had it may well have been hoarding it in order to obtain some street cred or what have you, But then there is also the possibility that Microsoft or Nintendo or whoever could have come down like a ton of bricks on anyone who did release it, if they found out who was responsible. Those keen to finally preserve a game, or even just to play it, often have to go through an awful lot of sensitive and secretive negotiations in order to gradually prize the game out. There may also be the odd bit of exotic trolling. On Christmas Day last year, someone went ahead and posted a download of the file to the /v board on 4chan, with just one problem. It was protected by a 100 character password. Now I presume plenty of people have tried to brute force it, but as of right now the file is thought to be unhackable. But it was enough to start the wheels running on GoldenEye again. On February 1st, someone uploads a full 2-hour playthrough of the game to YouTube, and then at last, on February the 3rd, a user by the name of Fedorovna uploads the Project Bean files publicly to the Internet Archive. As usual, it's there for virtually no time at all before it's wiped, but it's enough for it to finally get out there. Obviously, I can't tell you where to go for it, but it's around. By this stage of the game, GoldenEye 007 XBLA may be little more than a historical curiosity for a lot of people. We are talking about an unreleased 14-year-old remaster of a 24-year-old Nintendo 64 game, after all. But happily, what we have to play around with isn't a build that's barely put together from early on in development with all sorts of stuff missing. What's here is pretty close to complete, with all the levels and multiplayer present and correct, and only some minor bugs to sort out that don't actually affect the gameplay that much. Once again, this was initially cancelled at just about the last minute. We can wonder a little about whether all the features in this HD port would have made it into the final released version, but, well, it's GoldenEye, and it's a whole new way to play the game. So, how is it, after all these years? I mean, we can't exactly review it, seeing as it's technically unfinished, but we can certainly have a good look around. The easiest answer to the question of how is it would be that, well, again, it's GoldenEye. We've been through this already. Rare didn't change that much of anything about the gameplay. It's the same thing that they did with their remaster of Perfect Dark on XBLA. The actual gameplay was left virtually untouched, which was what most people wanted, and considering that Perfect Dark is basically an unofficial sequel to GoldenEye, running in the same engine, you might get a bit more out of that, at least when it comes to playing with other people. Although naturally folks are trying to get the online multiplayer fully working in this version of GoldenEye, and they do appear to be making progress. So a lot of your initial disposition towards this port will depend on how much you already love GoldenEye, and seeing as it's pretty damn old by this point, that often depends on whether you grew up with it or not. I've seen many folk online wonder just what the big deal is about this release, seeing as it's just another old console FPS, while another group of people shouts at the first group that they're wrong and stupid, and then the old flame wars rise again and so on. I didn't grow up with GoldenEye, but I do find this version of the game a lot of fun still, and the technical improvements like the nice smooth 60 frames and the update to 720p resolution certainly make it a lot more bearable than, well, playing it on N64. It's not anything technically groundbreaking, not even for 2007, but it is welcome. And there is, of course, the option to switch to N64 mode if you want that authentic low quality fuzziness. Now, would this feature have actually made it to the released game? That's not set in stone. Early builds of XBLA Perfect Dark also contained this feature, but in the end it was cut from the released version of the game. It is possible that it might have been thought of more as a development tool, even if the ability to switch a port's graphics from the HD version to the original version on the fly would become commonplace thanks to the likes of Secret of Monkey Island and the anniversary release of Halo. There are a couple of bugs here and there, but all things considered they're pretty frickin' minor. We're talking about the odd weird texture, or something that just feels a bit out of place, perhaps the lighting needs a bit of tweaking in some areas and so on. The funniest bug is probably the one you get when you open up the pause menu and Bond looks at the old watch. At this point it looks like he's wearing every single one of the costumes he wears during the game at once, although this isn't the case in regular play. Apparently there were a couple more major bugs that were sorted out by the hackers, like preventing the leaderboards from crashing the game, and they also added support for 21:9 resolution. So yeah, you can play GoldenEye fully on an ultra-wide monitor if you wish. That certainly sounds cool to me, but alas I don't have an ultra-wide monitor, so I can't show it off. With no bugs or anything like that getting in the way, it's easy enough to concentrate on all the things that make GoldenEye quite fun, especially in this version. Even if the game is kind of old-fashioned and outdated by this point for many obvious reasons, there's a lot of things that GoldenEye, and indeed that Perfect Dark, does that make the game pretty fun to play. As opposed to being realistic in any way, the game is still very good at essentially giving you a good old gunfight from a James Bond movie. Enemies give chase, they shout at you, they stand and blast at you, they may occasionally roll or sidestep at random, and soon enough they will die quite theatrically. Thank heavens Rare never thought of sticking any kind of ragdoll physics in here and stuck with the original game's memorable canned animations, of which there are many. Hats and weapons also tend to go flying, which helps a lot. Generally speaking, there's a lot of manic intensity to gunfights, especially when you're confronted by large groups, you've found a bit of cover, and you're trying to target, but the nature of using the right stick for it means you're not actually doing a lot beyond spraying and praying yourself. Realistic? Not really. But again, it feels quite cinematic in a very James Bond type action movie shootout kind of way. And when you've got the game's classic soundtrack just pumping away, it's actually kind of awesome. Obviously, if you already love GoldenEye, you probably don't need me to tell you any of this. You're probably thinking I'm a complete and utter berg because it took me 24 years and a freaking unreleased HD version of the game finally getting leaked to really figure out just what it is that people liked about GoldenEye, even though it was so clearly far beyond any other FPS that you could get on a console at the time. Now, your PC bods, and that's where I soon ended up, would surely see the best that you could get on console as damning with faint praise, because GoldenEye so clearly has nothing on the likes of Quake 2 or Unreal, let alone freaking Half-Life that was only a year away from coming out when this game originally hit. Now sure, that's true in areas, but then this is also a very different experience from your average computer FPS, and in many ways they're not all that comparable. GoldenEye couldn't ever hope to provide the precision and pinpoint accuracy of a computer FPS due to the difference in controls, therefore it's designed in such a way that you don't need any of those things, and you instead get quickfire and reactive gunfights where both you and the enemy are going to expend lots of ammo, which isn't a problem because the game chucks extra bullets at you like candy. It's designed around limitations. It's kind of silly, isn't it? I didn't mean to review GoldenEye here, especially not an unfinished old beta of it, but then this version of the game's so close to being finished that I kind of ended up doing it anyway without actually wanting to. It's really cool to finally have a look at this XBLA version of GoldenEye, and it's obviously a shame that we never saw it at the time. If you've got a hacked Xbox 360, or if you're able to run Xenia, you can have a look at it yourself. Xenia does generally require a strong PC, but the hackers did keep this in mind when optimising this version, and it's not like this is any sort of AAA game even by 2007 standards, so you may well be able to run it anyway. It's absolutely worth looking at, and if you're already a fan of GoldenEye, so much the better. If you aren't, you still may have a lot of fun with it regardless. And with that said, hopefully you've enjoyed this look at a game that was lost for so long and is now found. And you know what? I reckon it was actually worth waiting all the bloody time for. Bye for now. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you like it, please do like it, subscribe to the channel, have a look at my social media, my Twitch, and also have a look at my Patreon. You could join this list of awesome people here. Alexa Jones-Gonzalez, Andrew Dalton, Arcade-LY Webmaster, Brian Henniger, D. Xalio Rimwan Sutter, Dagorath Dungeon Keeper, Danny Wolfers, David Matuszek, David Rose, Dinty76538, Douglas Miller, Dustin Cooper, Gary Samaden, Glunfeth, Jays Manchild, James Brown, Jace Alexander, Jeff Ladd, Johnny, Kid Cassette, Lucas Kaligowski, Mike Clayton Travis, Martin Pataki, Nate Milbank, Peter Bushstar Bushnell, Piotr Margel, Ren Bimon, Robert Di Felice, Rod B, Rusty Kelly, Sam Stoddart, Seth A. Robinson, Simon Gulliver, Stuart Christopher Brownlee, Tamuz, Tariq Amir, Tom K, Yerka Operator, and to all the rest of the awesome community, thank you so much and goodbye.